Have you ever sat on your couch, looked down at your feline companion, and felt a sudden wave of guilt, wondering if you just did something to deeply offend them? It is an unsettling realization that despite sharing our homes, our beds, and our daily lives with these enigmatic creatures, we might be completely misreading their boundaries. We often treat our cats like little humans in furry suits, showering them with love in ways we understand, completely blind to the fact that in the feline world, some of our most common displays of affection are perceived as outright acts of aggression, disrespect, or psychological torture. The truth is, cats do not think like us, and they certainly do not forgive accidental boundary violations as easily as a human friend might. When we cross these invisible lines, we aren't just mildly annoying them, we are actively eroding their sense of safety, spiking their cortisol levels, and fracturing the fragile bond of trust we have spent years building. Feline behavioral scientists and veterinary psychologists have spent decades studying the intricate, often silent language of domestic cats, and their findings are a stark wake-up call for pet parents worldwide. If you have noticed your cat suddenly grooming themselves aggressively after you pet them, pulling away when you lean in for a kiss, or staring at you with dilated pupils from across the room, you are likely crossing boundaries you didn't even know existed. To truly understand what is going on inside that complex feline mind, we have to strip away our human biases and look at the world through the eyes of a small, hyper-vigilant predator that doubles as a prey animal. Let us begin with something almost every cat owner is guilty of, an act of affection that we consider the ultimate expression of love, but one that actually triggers a cat's primal survival instincts in the worst way possible. Think about what happens when you see your cat looking incredibly cute on the rug, and you instinctively bend over, scoop them up in your arms, and cradle them like a human baby. To you, this is a warm, loving hug. But to your cat, the psychological experience is entirely different. In the wild, the only time a feline experiences a sudden, forceful restriction of its movement from above is when it is being captured by a larger predator, like a coyote or a large bird of prey. The moment you lift your cat's paws off the solid ground and trap their limbs against your chest, a cascade of stress hormones floods their system. They lose their primary mechanism of defense, which is their ability to flee. Even if your cat tolerates this and purrs, behavioral studies show that this purring isn't always a sign of happiness, but rather a self-soothing mechanism used to cope with high anxiety. When you force a cat into a tight embrace, you are crossing a massive physical boundary, forcing them to submit to a state of helplessness that goes entirely against their evolutionary programming. Moving on to another incredibly common yet invisible boundary violation, we must talk about the concept of scent ownership and how our modern hygiene habits are accidentally waging a chemical war on our cat's sanity. Cats live in a world dictated almost entirely by olfactory communication. They possess an organ in the roof of their mouth called the vomeronasal organ, which allows them to essentially taste pheromones in the air. When your cat rubs their cheeks, chin, and flanks against your legs or your furniture, they aren't just itching themselves, they are depositing facial pheromones to create a communal group scent. This scent profile is their ultimate comfort blanket, signaling that their environment is safe and secure. Now think about what happens when you come home from work, take a hot shower using heavily perfumed body wash, put on freshly laundered clothes smelling of synthetic lavender, and then spray a blast of citrus air freshener around the living room. To a human, the house smells clean. To your cat, you have just dropped a chemical bomb that completely obliterates their hard-earned security markers. Citrus, in particular, is highly offensive to a cat's sensitive nose, acting as a natural repellent. When you constantly cover yourself and your home in strong artificial fragrances, you are essentially erasing your cat's signature from their own territory, forcing them into a chronic state of low-grade environmental stress as they desperately try to remark their space. Another surprising way we accidentally cross a psychological line involves how we handle their physical space, specifically when we decide to invade their designated safe zones. Every single cat requires a sanctuary, a place where they feel completely untouchable, whether that is a high perch on a cat tree, a specific cardboard box, or the dark corner under your bed. The unspoken rule of feline psychology is that when a cat retires to their safe spot, they are officially off duty and withdrawing from social interaction. Unfortunately, well-meaning owners often ignore this boundary. If a guest comes over and wants to see the cat, the owner might reach under the bed and drag the protesting feline out into the open to be social. Or, if the cat is sleeping peacefully in their favorite enclosed bed, the owner might reach in to forcefully pet them. This is a severe breach of trust. By violating the sanctity of their safe zone, you teach your cat that nowhere in the house is truly secure. This lack of a reliable escape route can lead to chronic anxiety, which often manifests as sudden behavioral issues, including territorial aggression, hiding for days on end, or even inappropriate urinating outside the litter box. Speaking of physical contact, let us dive into a highly sensitive boundary that centers around a phenomenon known to veterinary behaviorists as petting-induced overstimulation. We all know the classic scenario where a cat is happily enjoying some head scratches, purring loudly, when suddenly, out of nowhere, they turn around and swat or bite your hand. It feels like an unpredictable, unprovoked betrayal, but in reality, the cat was likely screaming at you to stop for several minutes using subtle body language. A cat's skin, particularly along their back, tail base, and belly, is packed with incredibly sensitive nerve endings and tactile receptors. While a few gentle strokes feel amazing, continuous petting in these areas quickly overloads their nervous system, turning a pleasant sensation into something that feels like static electricity or actual physical discomfort. When you ignore their subtle warning signs, like a twitching tail tip, flattening ears, a tense body, or a sudden cessation of purring, you cross a physical threshold. The cat is forced to escalate from polite body language to a physical bite or scratch just to make you stop. By learning to respect the boundary of their tolerance levels and focusing your touch primarily on their scent glands around the cheeks, chin, and behind the ears, you avoid pushing them into this defensive state. Another deeply rooted boundary that humans constantly violate has to do with eye contact and facial expressions. In human culture, looking someone directly in the eyes is a sign of respect, honesty, and engagement. In the animal kingdom, and particularly among felines, a direct, unblinking stare is the ultimate declaration of hostility and confrontation. When you stare intently at your cat, perhaps admiring their beautiful eyes, your cat doesn't see admiration, they see a challenge. They perceive a fixed gaze as the behavior of a predator stalking its prey or a rival threatening a fight. This is why you will often notice that a cat in a room full of people will naturally gravitate toward the one person who is ignoring them or who dislikes cats. That person is keeping their eyes down, which the cat interprets as polite, non-threatening behavior. If you want to show your cat love without crossing this optical boundary, you must use the famous slow blink, which feline behaviorists refer to as the kitty kiss. By closing your eyes slowly and looking away, you are signaling that you are vulnerable, relaxed, and have absolutely no aggressive intentions toward them. But that's not all, because our daily schedules and sudden lifestyle changes can cross a psychological boundary regarding predictability that can completely shatter a cat's emotional stability. Cats are notorious creatures of habit, thriving on rigid routines. In their minds, predictability equals survival. They need to know exactly when resources will be available, when the environment will be quiet, and when they can expect human interaction. When you drastically alter their schedule, perhaps by feeding them hours late, changing their litter type overnight, or suddenly moving the furniture around, you disrupt their internal clock. This chaotic shift crosses an emotional boundary, plunging them into a state of cognitive dissonance where they can no longer predict the safety of their surroundings. This stress can cause real physical illness, such as feline idiopathic cystitis, a painful bladder inflammation directly linked to psychological distress. Protecting this boundary means making changes to their environment or routine incredibly slowly, giving their sensitive minds time to adapt. Let us look at another major boundary issue that occurs in multi-pet households, which revolves around the critical concept of resource distribution and forced sharing. Humans love the idea of sharing. We teach it to our children and we practice it daily. Cats, however, are solitary hunters by nature, meaning they never evolved the social mechanisms required to comfortably share vital resources like food, water, and waste elimination sites. When we force multiple cats to eat out of bowls placed right next to each other, or expect 3 cats to share a single litter box in the laundry room, we are violating their biological boundaries. Even if your cats seem to get along and don't actively fight, placing their resources too close together forces them into a constant state of passive competition. One cat might sit casually in the doorway, blocking the other's access to the litter box without ever making a sound. This silent bullying is incredibly stressful. The golden rule of feline territory management is the +1 rule, meaning you should always have one more litter box, food bowl, and water station than the number of cats you own, scattered across different locations in the house, ensuring no single cat can control or restrict access to another's survival needs. Another common mistake involves how we handle our cat's natural instinct to scratch and climb, often punishing them for behaviors that are fundamental to their biological identity. When a cat scratches your expensive leather sofa or climbs up your window curtains, it is easy to view it as malicious destruction or bad behavior. But scratching is not an optional hobby for a cat. It is a physiological necessity. It allows them to shed the outer dead sheaths of their claws, stretch their back muscles, and visually mark their territory with the scent glands located in their paw pads. When you yell at your cat, clap your hands loudly, or spray them with water for scratching your furniture, you are crossing a boundary by punishing them for simply being a cat. You are creating a confusing, hostile environment where their natural, healthy instincts are met with human aggression. Instead of violating this boundary with punishment, a successful pet owner redirects the behavior by providing appropriate, sturdy scratching posts placed directly next to the items the cat wants to scratch, effectively honoring their need while protecting the home. Moving forward, we must also address the boundary of auditory comfort, specifically regarding the volume and frequency of sounds we introduce into our homes. A cat's hearing is one of the most sophisticated apparatuses in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting high-pitched frequencies up to 64 kilohertz,